first going to bring on Lisa Materazzo, and she is the Vice President of Lexus Marketing, and she has more than 10 years of combined agency and client experience in the automotive industry. And what she's going to share with us today is really talk about how, even with everything that's been going on, even with all the social distancing and everyone staying at home and working from home, how Lexus is still managing to treat consumers to an in-home experience. So welcome, Lisa.
Hello, Lisa. It's nice to see you.
It's great to see you. So where are you coming to us from?
I am in Texas.
In Texas, all right. So getting a little bit sketchy there. How are you feeling there?
It's well, it's warm. That's the biggest challenge here, I think.
Really? Well,
in the middle of summer, it's very hot.
Too, believe me. So I understand that as well. So it's definitely, and I actually lost power all last week. So try being in 90-degree weather without any air conditioning or fans or anything like that. So it's definitely been a challenge. But well, I'm glad you're able to, be with us today, because it's a great opportunity for everyone to, keep in touch with everyone. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Well, before we do get to the questions though, we're going to play a video. You brought us a commercial that Lexus launched on March 26th this year. So before we even talk about that, let's take a look at that. Ryan?
When we first opened our doors, it didn't take us long to realize
we weren't in the car business.
At Lexus, we were in the people business.
We needed to be helpful,
respectful,
and compassionate.
To treat people like guests.
It's what we all signed up for.
And now when people need this most, we will do what we've always done.
Take care of people first.
The rest will follow.
That's great. I mean, as I said, March 26th. So that's 2 weeks after it was really announced that, or declared that it was a pandemic. Very polished, just a really great commercial. How did you do that? How did you pull that together so quickly, especially in the midst of everything that was going on?
It was definitely an interesting process. So obviously everyone came to the realization that we were in the midst of a pandemic. And after that initial shock wore off, we realized that we really needed to look at all the content we had in market. And certainly in the month of March, we would normally be in the middle of our Invitation to Lexus sales event. We felt that wasn't appropriate given the sentiment, consumer sentiment, and the news of COVID. So we very quickly pivoted. And one of the things that we used to ground us and really determine where we should go is we came back to who we are as a brand. We are in the people business. We're a very human-centered brand, and we used our covenant, which is really our mission statement, to guide us. And we thought, what message do we want to put out there to reassure folks? And this is what we came up with.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said, it's a great ad, and it doesn't look like something that was put together in 2 weeks at all. But getting back to, you sort of talked about when it first hit and you sort of had to, take a step or a moment and figure out what's going on. How was that experience initially? I mean, internally, obviously with with the dealerships, they're having their own challenges. Tell me about that and what you experienced at that time.
Sure. Well, it definitely affected all areas of our business. So I think that was the biggest shock. Is it wasn't just one initiative, one activity, or one piece of our business that was disrupted. It was everything that we were doing. But really a credit to the team and to our dealers to be able to come together and figure out how to do what we do best. And it ranged everything from our marketing to our creative production to how our dealers changed their operations, how they interacted with their guests in order to still deliver that amazing experience, but be very in tune to what the needs were. And of course, the other challenging point was it wasn't the same across the United States. So different areas were impacted in different ways and at different levels. So that's something that we also had to adjust to.
So it sounds like there really needed to be this communication base. I mean, it couldn't be this one mandate that this is what we're doing. And you just really needed to keep in touch with, everyone and everywhere and kind of go from there.
Absolutely. And I think throughout all of this, communication has been the key to success. We've been over communicating. And I think that actually, I don't think there's such a thing these days as over communicating, because the market is changing quickly, circumstances are changing quickly. And the more you're communicating, and that's not only with your team members and your dealer partners, but also your agency partners, the less likely you'll have things slip through the cracks. And you'll also have thinking from really every single perspective, which is what is needed when you're dealing with this level of disruption.
Right, and especially as you said, there's a lot of different people, a lot of different areas but it's still one brand. So you want to make sure everyone's still in line with that messaging and getting in line with that, because, and you sort of talked about it evolved. Like it first hit, and we saw with your commercial, it was very important for you to let everyone, consumers, know that you are here for them. You've always been here for them. And that was really your initial messaging. But as the pandemic, the crisis moved forward and things have been changing. And then even we had BLM movement, and that was obviously a lot of social change going on there. And just consumer behavior was drastically changing. How did you deal with that kind of messaging at that moment throughout it evolved?
Yes, I think it's definitely making sure that you're in tune with the consumer sentiment and what is appropriate to message, what's not appropriate to message. So even in the work that we initially put on air, that was an example that you just saw, our People First campaign, it really was to let people know that we were there for them. We knew it wasn't appropriate to have a sales event message in market at the time. Fast forward, some subsequent work that we've done, we've really tapped into this desire people have to get back out into the world. And that may be as simple as getting in their car and taking a drive, but kind of inspiring them with that optimism and that feeling, that joy of being back out in the world. And to let folks know whenever they're ready to take that step, it may be today and maybe a couple months from now, that Lexus can be a part of that.
Right, and to, as you said, it's sort of to bring joy back. Initially everyone had to sort of look at the realities and, sort of take that gut check. But then as we move forward, everyone was like, all right, now I want to look good. I'm going to do my hair, or I'm going to, find some games to do and occupy my time. And that's the mentality. So you guys, it sounds like you kept to your message, but you evolved as, consumer thoughts and how consumer behavior was evolving.
Exactly. And outside of our messaging, the advertising, the marketing communication is one aspect of it, but we've also looked to what we can do beyond that. How can we be part of some of the positive that comes from all of this? So we have, we've partnered, as an example, with our Lexus Culinary Master Chefs. Obviously, the restaurant industry has been hit really hard by COVID, but many of these chefs have their own charitable initiatives and things they're doing, not only to support their team members who are directly impacted by restaurant shutdowns, but also the restaurant community. So we've tried to be a part of that and use our presence in culinary to do good and to help out where we can. So I think there are a lot of things that we can do. Certainly the messaging and the marketing is a piece of it, but there are other ways that we can be involved as well and bring some of that joy, as you mentioned.
Right, a lot of different channels, which I want to jump to, but I first want to ask you, staying in line with marketing at this point, but then I know there's something I'll be asking you about that you're much more excited about. But anyway, in terms of your media mix, that has to have had evolved. I mean, was there ever a moment where you sort of said, we should go dark? And how, if so, what did you do? And if not, how has it evolved since when, the pandemic first hit and to today?
Sure. Well, media has been obviously very disrupted, and I think the biggest disruption is for sports. So sports programming, and whether there's a lot of sports fans out there. So as a enthusiast, it's killing me that sports is really not on anymore. So that's hard to deal with. And as an advertiser, certainly so many games have been disrupted, either been canceled or postponed, or in some cases, I guess the best case scenario is the games are still taking place, but the spectators aren't there. But sports is a big media pillar for us. So that's presented a bit of a challenge. In some cases, as I said, if the games are going forward, we can still participate in that. There's been some postponements. I think the one big outstanding issue for us is what will happen with professional football. We're hoping that that is still a go, but we'll have to wait and see. We have looked at the opportunity though. So can we test and learn in other areas? Are there things that we can do to reach that same audience, maybe in a non-traditional way? So those are some of the ways that we've approached it, but it has no doubt disrupted our media mix.
Did you find anything? I mean, socially maybe, or, I know that there's a lot of, even though sports were no longer, people still were going to sports sites. People still were trying to get that fix. Was there anything that you found in particular that worked well for you?
A variety of different things that we've tried, and we've tried new platforms, but we've also tried just changing our strategies a bit on some of the tactics that we had been using. So connected TV is an example where we changed it up just a little bit, and we were able to kind of redeploy some of our investment in order to somewhat make up for what we lost with sports programming.
Now, well, getting to sports, which is why I know that this is something that's you are very fond of, to say the least, is you're being involved in motorsports activations, and that was able to happen. But like all sports, as we've been talking about, there's been so much uncertainty, and I'm sure leading into it, there was still uncertainty of whether you will be involved, will you, join them again? And tell me about that experience, and then how you actually made it happen and made it work for you guys.
Definitely. So you tapped into one of my passion points, which is motorsports. So for Lexus, we race in the IMSA GTD series. And of course, when COVID hit, motorsports was affected, really all forms of motorsports. I was very pleased, though, I'm sure many other people were as well, that we were able to get back to racing. And the folks at IMSA did a great job figuring out how to make that work. Now, it doesn't look like it looked pre-COVID. So there are changes, all positive changes, because they're keeping people safe, they're keeping the team safe. Hospitality has been disrupted because you can't bring people together that closely, but we're a few races in now, and we're figuring it out, and I hope as things get better, we will be able to get back closer to normal. For us, we've had 3 wins, three in a row, a three-peat. So we I guess from that perspective, we're adjusting really well to this COVID environment.
Yeah, no, and I mean, as you said, everyone sort of has to adjust to, it's not the same, but this isn't the same. It's just, but you've got to get out there, and you have to just keep continuing living and doing as best as we can do at this moment right now.
Absolutely, and we've tried to stay as true as possible to an on-track experience. So we've experimented with different tactics. We, for example, normally, if we were at track, we would bring our drivers into our fan engagement area. They would sign autographs. They would speak to our guests. We did do a virtual driver appearance. So we're figuring our way through it, and we're trying to deliver a very special experience to those who are watching.
Right. And you talked a little bit about how you sort of had to switch your investments to, where you were losing in sports and put them elsewhere. And I just wanted to get, if you can dive a little bit deeper into that, like what was working for you at that time? And then even just planning further on, as you said, there's still so much uncertainty. How are you managing that right now?
Yeah, it is a day-to-day thing. So we are contingency planning. So we're basically trying to look at multiple scenarios and stay very flexible. And I mentioned it earlier about communication. The key to it is communication, because I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen, but we do have contingency plans, and we're speaking, to all our business partners. We're making sure we're on the same page, and that's been a really big takeaway for us. Is the more information our partners have, the better and the faster they're able to help us respond as we come upon these decision points. What are we going to do with our media investment? How are we going to shift our dollars? Or how are we going to execute in the same space, just differently in light of COVID?
Right. And it will even going into 2021. I mean, hopefully COVID will not be something that we're considering in the way that we are in terms of lockdowns. But at the same point, there's still uncertainty of that. And how do you plan for that when you don't really know what you're planning for?
Exactly. And I think that the jury is still out on the long-term changes that there may be because of COVID in terms of buyer behavior and also media consumption. So I personally think there is some level of change that will stick for the long term. I don't know if we're ever going to return to normal, or I should say pre-COVID, what we experienced pre-COVID. So that's the biggest, I think that's the biggest outstanding issue when we get into 2021 and beyond, when, hopefully things settle down. The virus is not a threat, or not as big as a threat as it is now. What will things look like? What will the consumer sentiment be? Where will they be consuming their media? How will they shop for a range of product, not just automotive, but basically everything?
How much behavior that has changed will stay that way.
Exactly.
Really. And even if we talk about, obviously having motorsports and being able to be a part of that, that's, an event. But for the most part, events, really we haven't been able to do that, at least in person, since COVID hit. How are you making up for that? Because that's a big way to, in terms of, engaging with consumers about your brand. Is there something you're doing to sort of capture that audience now?
We are, and it really it's a case-by-case basis, honestly, to figure out how we're capturing that audience. Just as an example, one of the things I know you're well aware of is we were going to debut our new Lexus IS at the New York Auto Show. That was first postponed, and then it was canceled. So that's an example of something that we had to pivot. We had to figure out what we were going to do. We still needed to get in front of that audience. What we ultimately ended up doing was taking that world premiere online, virtually, and it was a really great initiative for us, because we learned a lot by doing that, and we also had the opportunity to include more people. So we were able to open it up to the public. Many more people were able to attend, and we were very happy with how that was ultimately executed. If you contrast that as an example, another event fairly recently is we are involved pretty heavily in the culinary space, and specifically in food and wine festivals. And we have been a partner with the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen for 15 years. That was another event that was canceled. But we were able to work with the event organizers and Food and Wine magazine, and actually be part of transitioning that to a virtual environment. So that's something you initially may think, well, how do you do food and wine online? But we made it work. And I think there were new elements of it we were able to lean into, charitable component, where we reached a bunch of people, and we were able to make it as engaging of an experience virtually as it would have been if it took place in person. So I don't think there's one single strategy that's worked across all of these initiatives when we pivot, but it is taking them one by one and figuring out how to bring it to life in a new way, how to reimagine it, if you will.
Yeah, and I do have one more question, but before I do, I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question for Lisa, let us know, raise your hand, we'll unmute you and then call on you, because we want to hear from you. Just as Lisa's saying, we want to make it as engaging as possible. But my question is, I like to ask everyone to find that silver lining. And you've actually, seems like you've mentioned a couple of those, but is there that one takeaway, that one actionable thing that you learned through all of these challenges that you feel like you'll bring with you moving forward, even as we get out of this pandemic?
Well, first of all, I would say kudos to my team. A real shout out to them because they have adjusted. The agency partners, we have fabulous agency partners, and they've adjusted, and everyone's kept their sense of humor through all of this, which I think you have to have as well. And again, there was the initial shock of the realization that we were in the midst of a pandemic. But after that, everyone focused, got to work, stayed in really close contact, and we haven't missed a beat. So I think it's a real testament to the teams who have stepped up that they were able to adjust.
That's really important. And so, I mean, is that your learned lesson that you know you can count on your team?
I'll tell you, I knew I could, but it was great to see it in action and how quickly they pivoted and just how much they're hanging in there, because I think we know it's hard now. This has been going on for quite some time, and maybe at the beginning we thought, okay, it's a week or a month and we're going to be working virtually. Fast forward, and this is probably what we're going to be dealing with for a bit longer. And we know the challenges of working from home. It's not necessarily perfect, but we try to find the humor in it.
Yes.
And power through the tech issues and get our work done. And we've made it happen.
Well, I think that's great. And I think Tanya is with us now. So do we have some questions for Lisa?
We do. We've got a question from Brett Cohen. I am going to unmute Brett and ask him to tell us where he's from and then what his question is. So Brett, you can go ahead.
Hi guys. Hi Lisas. I am from Los Angeles, where both Lisas used to live. I know Lisa Single personally, and then
Brett was my old roommate. Did not even know he was going to participate. All of a sudden in chat, he's like, "Hey, Lisa."
And Lisa, I'll call you Lisa M to delineate or designate. I think I sent you a Starbucks gift card maybe 5-6 years ago. Do you recall that they asked for 10 minutes of your time?
I do remember that.
That's me too. So I work for a company called Methodify. We're an agile marketing platform. We specialize in customer feedback quickly and cost effectively. So my question for Lisa M is, you mentioned you're in tune with customer sentiment. I was curious, what is your process of being in tune? Are you using customer feedback to develop ads, to test them? Can you give us a little color about that, please?
Yeah, so all of the above. We're in tune with our guests through a variety of channels, everything from research, qualitative and quantitative, monitoring social media activity, and of course through our guest experience center, and then finally through our dealers. So it really just depends on what issue we're specifically diving into. If we focus more single-mindedly on one of those metrics or measurement tools, but we do try to look just generally the totality of all the information that we have available to gauge consumer sentiment.
Any more questions, Tanya?
Yeah, we are getting really close on time, but I think we've got time for one more quick one. Actually, Lisa Mark wrote, what marketing techniques do you think may stick post-COVID?
Interesting. So, I think probably, I don't know if it's a specific technique off the top of my head, but I think if we've learned anything from COVID, it has really accelerated online. I mean, everything online. So initially people were forced to be online. And I think that's one of the big changes that will stick. Certainly it's not a new trend. It's not something that everyone woke up and said, oh, I can get online now and I can shop or I can have groceries delivered. I think it's just accelerated those trends. I think they'll stick. And I think anything that will make it easier and more seamless for consumers to decide how much or how little they want to do online is really going to be the key. And I see that again across all industries. It's not just car buying, but it's grocery shopping. It's anything that you purchase, whether goods or services, that I think is going to be one of the things that sticks.
Great. Well, if we have more questions, we will get them to you. People can just chat them to me and I will pass them along. I know we need to stay on schedule today, so I'm going to hand things over